Chapter 8, Part 10 of Junior Classics Volume 2, Folk Tales and Myths. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Emma Stays. Junior Classics Volume 2, Folk Tales and Myths by William Patent. Chapter 8, Myths of Greece and Rome, Part 10, The 12 Labors of Hercules, by Thomas Bulfinch. Hercules was the son of Jupiter and Alcmena. As Juno was always hostile to the offspring of her husband by mortal mothers, she declared war against Hercules from his birth. She sent 2 serpents to destroy him as he lay in his cradle, but the brave infant strangled them with his own hands. He was, however, by the arts of Juno, rendered subject to Eurystheus and compelled to perform all his commands. Eurystheus gave him a succession of desperate tasks, which are called the 12 Labors of Hercules. The first was to fight with the Nemean lion. The valley of Nemea was infested by a terrible lion. Eurystheus ordered Hercules to bring him the skin of this monster. After using in vain his clubs and arrows against the lion, Hercules strangled the animal with his hands. He returned carrying the dead lion on his shoulders, but Eurystheus was so frightened at the sight of it, and at this proof of the prodigious strength of the hero, that he ordered him to deliver the account of his exploits in the future, outside of the town. His next labor was the slaughter of the Hydra. This monster ravaged the country of Argos, and dwelt in a swamp near the well of Amymone. This well had been discovered by Amymone when the country was suffering from drought, and the story was that Neptune, who loved her, had permitted her to touch the rock with his trident, and a spring of 3 outlets burst forth. Here the Hydra took up his position, and Hercules was sent to destroy him. The Hydra had 9 heads, of which the middle one was immortal. Hercules struck off its heads with his clubs, but in the place of the head knocked off, 2 new ones grew forth each time. At length, with the assistance of his faithful servant Iolaus, he burned away the heads of the Hydra and buried the 9th, or the immortal one, under a huge rock. Another labor was the cleaning of the Aegean stables. Aegeus, king of Elis, had a herd of 3,000 oxen whose stalls had not been cleansed for 30 years. Hercules brought the rivers Alpheus and Peneus through them, and cleansed them thoroughly in one day. His next labor was of a more delicate kind. Admeta, the daughter of Eurystheus, longed to obtain the girdle of the queen of the Amazons, and Eurystheus ordered Hercules to go and get it. The Amazons were a nation of women. They were very warlike and held several flourishing cities. It was their custom to bring up only the female children. The boys were either sent away to the neighboring nations or put to death. Hercules was accompanied by a number of volunteers, and after various adventures at last reached the country of the Amazons. Hippolyta, the queen, received him kindly and consented to yield him her girdle. But Juno, taking the form of an Amazon, went and persuaded the rest that the strangers were carrying off their queen. They instantly armed and came in great numbers down to the ship. Hercules, thinking that Hippolyta had acted treacherously, slew her, and taking her girdle, made sail homeward. Another task enjoined him was to bring to Eurystheus the oxen of Geryon, a monster with 3 bodies, who dwelt in the island of Erythrea, the Red, so called because it lay at the west, under the rays of the setting sun. This description is thought to apply to Spain, of which Geryon was king. After traversing various countries, Hercules reached at length the frontiers of Libya and Europe, where he raised 2 of the mountains of Calpe and Abila as monuments of his progress, or, according to another account, rent one mountain into 2, and left half on each side, forming the straits of Gibraltar, the 2 mountains being called the Pillars of Hercules. The oxen were guarded by the giant Eurytion and his 2-headed dog, but Hercules killed the giant and his dog, and brought away the oxen in safety to Eurystheus. The most difficult labor of all was getting the golden apples of Hesperide, for Hercules did not know where to find them. These were the apples which Juno had received at her wedding from the goddess of the earth, and which she had entrusted to the keeping of the daughters of Hesperus, assisted by a watchful dragon. A celebrated exploit of Hercules was his victory over Antaeus. Antaeus, the son of Terra, the earth, was a mighty giant and a wrestler. whose strength was invincible so long as he remained in contact with his Mother Earth. He compelled all strangers who came into his country to wrestle with him, on condition that if conquered, as they all were, they should be put to death. Hercules encountered him, and finding that it was of no avail to throw him, for he always rose with renewed strength from every fall, he lifted him up from the earth and strangled him in the air. Cacus was a huge giant who inhabited a cave on Mount Aventine and plundered the surrounding country. When Hercules was driving home the oxen of Geryon, Cacus stole part of the cattle while the heroes slept. That their footprints might not serve to show where they had been driven, he dragged them backwards by their tails to his cave, so that their tracks all seemed to show that they had gone in the opposite direction. Hercules was deceived by the stratagem, and would have failed to find his oxen, if it had not happened that in driving the remainder of the herd past the cave, where the stolen ones were concealed, those within began to low, and were thus discovered. Cacus was slain by Hercules. The last exploit we shall record was bringing Cerberus from the lower world. Cerberus was the three-headed dog that guarded the entrance to Hades. Hercules descended into Hades, accompanied by Mercury and Minerva. He obtained permission from Pluto to carry Cerberus to the upper air, provided he could do it without the use of weapons. And in spite of the monster's struggling, he seized him, held him fast, and carried him to Erythreus, and afterwards brought him back again. When he was in Hades, he obtained the liberty of Theseus. His admirer and imitator had been detained a prisoner there for an unsuccessful attempt to carry off Proserpine. Hercules, in a fit of madness, killed his friend Iphitus, and was condemned for this offense to become the slave of Queen Omphale for 3 years. While in this service, the hero's nature seemed changed. He lived effeminately, wearing at times the dress of a woman, spinning wool with the handmaidens of Omphale, while the queen wore his lion's skin. When the service was ended, he married Deianira, and lived in peace with her 3 years. On one occasion, as he was traveling with his wife, they came to a river, across which the centaur Nessus carried travelers for a stated fee. Hercules himself forded the river, but gave Deianira to Nessus to be carried across. Nessus attempted to run away with her, but Hercules heard her cries, and shot an arrow into the heart of Nessus. The dying centaur told Deianira to take a portion of his blood, and keep it, as it might be used as a charm to preserve the love of her husband. Deianira did so, and before long fancied she had occasion to use it. Hercules, in one of his conquests, had taken prisoner a fair maiden named Iole, of whom he seemed more fond than Deianira approved. When Hercules was about to offer sacrifices to the gods in honor of his victory, he sent to his wife for a white robe to use on the occasion. Deianira, thinking it a good opportunity to try her love spell, steeped the garment in the blood of Nessus. As soon as the garment became warm on the body of Hercules, the poison penetrated into all his limbs and caused him the most intense agony. In his frenzy he seized Lichas, who had brought him the fatal robe, and hurled him into the sea. He wrenched off the garment, but it stuck to his flesh, and with it he tore away whole pieces of his body. In this state he embarked on board a ship, and was conveyed home. Deianira, on seeing what she had unwittingly done, hung herself. Hercules, prepared to die, ascended Mount Oeta, where he built a funeral pyre of trees, gave his bows and arrows to Philoctetes, and laid himself down on the pile, his head resting on his club, and his lion's skin spread over him. With a countenance as serene as if he were taking his place at a festival board, he commanded Philoctetes to apply the torch. The flames spread apace, and soon invested the whole mass. The gods themselves felt troubled at seeing the champion of the earth so brought to his end. But Jupiter, with cheerful countenance, thus addressed them: "Fear not! He who conquered all else is not to be conquered by those flames which you see blazing on Mount Oeta. Only his mother's share in him can perish. What he derived from me is immortal. I shall take him, dead to earth, to the heavenly shores, and I require of you all to receive him kindly." Jupiter enveloped him in a cloud, and took him up in a 4-horse chariot to dwell among the stars. End of chapter 8, part 10.